All right. So you go out on a date with a guy, or maybe it's a few different dates, and things seem to be going really well, right? There's this strong chemistry between you. You feel like he's really into you. You are definitely really into him. Maybe things got a little heavy. Maybe you guys started kissing, or maybe things got even further. Maybe they didn't. Who knows? Maybe you just really, really like this guy, and then all of a sudden, it's like, boom, he goes cold. Maybe he disappears completely, or maybe he starts to fade away. So, what happened? And what can you do about it? My name is Matthew Coast, and welcome to Commitment Connection. If this is your first time to our channel, make sure that you go down and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our videos. Today, I'm going to be talking about 4 reasons why men come on strong and then disappear, and what to do about it. So first, I'm going to go over the 4 reasons, and then I'm going to talk about ways to kind of prevent this from happening in the future, and also a way on what to do when he comes back, if he does come back and you want to continue seeing him, or you want to open the possibility of continuing to see him, or if you just kind of want to know what happened. And so if you're with us right now, make sure that you say hi in the comments section. I love it when people say hi. Hi, Kelly, Kathy. Hey, everybody, say hi. Say hi if you're here with us. I love that kind of stuff. All right, so what are the reasons? What are the reasons why men come on strong then disappear? The first one is that he didn't think that you were actually all that interested in him. So one of the things that I've been talking about a lot recently on this channel is this idea of attainability, right? Guys do not want to be put into the friend zone. And so if a guy thinks that you're kind of cold to him, or you're not really interested in him, and he might end up landing in the friend zone, a lot of times he won't end up pursuing you, right? And so the reason that this happens, the main reason that this happens, is that you don't show enough interest in him, right? There's a lot of kind of books out there and programs out there that talk about kind of showing disinterest to a guy, and trying to, pretend like you're not really into him when you really are. And that works only if you're coming from a space of really strong desperation and you're like just grasping onto a guy, right? It doesn't work if you're kind of strong and confident, and you're in kind of this place where you feel your value and all that kind of stuff. If you don't show interest in a guy and you're in that space, the likelihood is that he's not going to pursue anything further with you because he doesn't think that you're interested in him. Or the other reason why this actually happens is because you do something like you set up a boundary, or you kind of say no to him, or give him kind of like a soft rejection. And instead of him interpreting it as a soft rejection, he interprets it as a hard rejection. So just a quick recap, there's soft rejections and hard rejections. Soft rejections are like, no, like not yet, right? Like, it's something that I want, but it's something that I don't want right now. And a hard rejection is like, no, I'm not interested. I don't like you. Get away from me. Well, a lot of times guys will interpret things that are supposed to be soft rejections as hard rejections. And if he interprets it as a hard rejection and he's not a really aggressive guy, a lot of times he might just totally stop, right? And so if there's something that you're doing, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but if you're rejecting a guy or you're setting a boundary, you have to do it in a way that you communicate to him, in a way that makes sense to him, that it's not a hard rejection, and you want him to continue kind of pursuing you and chasing you and investing in you. So that's number one. Number one, he didn't think you were actually all that interested in him. Number two is that he's feeling really strong in the moment and he gets caught up in how he feels, right? So a lot of times women kind of put this thing over, like this layer over men, where they kind of look at them as these beings that don't have a whole lot of emotion. Well, men, everybody's driven by emotion. That's the reality of the thing. Of everything, right? We're all driven by emotion. We do things because of emotion. Half the things that exist on the planet wouldn't exist if men weren't really emotional about things. And so men can get caught up in their emotions just like women can, right? Like, have you ever bought something where later on you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have bought that, right? Like, I don't know what I was thinking. Well, a lot of times what happens with men is we have these biological urges inside of us, right? Like these primal sexual biological urges. We meet a girl, there's this chemistry, there's this stuff going on, and we like get all caught up into it. And, you know, some guys take it just way to the extreme, and next thing they're like promising, like traveling around the world with some woman, or, you know, doing, you know, taking out her, spending lots of money trying to prove to her that he's a suitable mate. He's a suitable person for her to be with, right? It's kind of like the peacock showing the peacock's feathers, right? He's trying to impress you and show you how amazing he is. Well, sometimes guys do this too much, right? They'll do it so far to an extent where they feel like they can't even recover from it, right? They put themselves in this bad frame. And if you want to know more about frames, I talk about them in my Love Frames Toolkit, right? Frames are like this thing. It's the underlying interaction between a man and a woman, right? And if a guy creates this frame where he's constantly trying to impress you, and he's showing you, you know, how much money he has and all these other things, and he's not really that person that he's pretending he is because he's getting so caught up, or he's not, he goes home. Here's another thing that ends up happening is he'll go home and he'll start to realize that it's like a sobering up moment, right? And all of his, you know, the excitement, the lust, all this stuff kind of drove him like to just be all over you. And then he gets home and he kind of has this sobering moment, and all of his internal limiting beliefs start coming up, right? Guys have internal problems, internal like mental, emotional issues, just like a lot of women have, right? They have insecurities, they have confidence issues, they have feelings like they're not worthy and they're not good enough to have a woman or the relationship that they want to have. And a lot of times those things can end up making him sabotage his ability to get into the relationship that he wants with the woman that he wants. And then he goes home and he just starts doing things that sabotage it, like not contacting you back and not pursuing other things with you, or whatever. So those are two different ways that can happen. Is everybody understanding what's going on here? If you're here and you get what I'm talking about, just say, I get you in the comment section, and we will talk about it a little bit. We'll talk more about these different things. And if you have a question about something, make sure that you post the question in the comment section, and I'll go over all of the questions at the end of it. So, all right, so let's go over number 3. So number 3 is something I like to call, he's just testing the waters, right? So one of the things that ends up happening is that guys sometimes will just go out on lots of dates, right? They'll go out and just date lots of different women, kind of learn about different women, learn about the different processes, see kind of what kinds of women he likes and he doesn't like, and, you know, go out on dates that he might normally not even go out on, but he's doing it for kind of the experience and to learn about it. And there's something that kind of caught his attention, and, you know, and he's not really going out with a serious intent to get into any kind of serious committed relationship, right? And so what ends up happening with this is that this guy will go out and he'll end up hanging out with a woman, and he will end up, you know, maybe sparks fly, maybe he comes on strong, but he's not really serious about anything. And he's just hanging out and dating. And this is something that happens sometimes with guys over can be a period of years, right? Sometimes guys go through this over a period of years. And and it's not just guys. Whenever I'm talking about actually all of these things, it happens on both sides of the spectrum, right? Men and women do this. And this is something that a lot of guys do because they enjoy the process of going out on dates and meeting people. Like what we just talked about a minute ago. Men are emotional, right? We have needs and things that we need to get out of relationships, right? That's one of the things we talk about with the whole friend with benefits thing, and kind of the spectrum on which you should be progressing forward with a man, right? Because men have emotional needs, and sometimes you'll get those needs taken care of by going out on dates and getting that kind of feminine presence around him. Maybe he's getting compliments from you. Maybe he's feeling worthy and valuable by being around you. And then he leaves and, he's not really serious about getting into a relationship or even really dating or anything at all other than just experiencing some of those emotions. So that's number 3. And number 4 is he's not as into you as you are into him, right? And this is a common thing that happens all the time. I hear a lot of women complain about this, and we have a bunch of different ways to kind of combat this. But one of the things that happens is that they'll end up getting, like, a woman will go out on a date with a guy, and I hear this from women in our community all the time, and she is really like hot and heavy about him, but he wasn't quite as interested as she was, right? But she misinterpreted it as this deep connection between the two of them, right? And she'll say things to him like, "Oh my God, I feel like we're so connected," right? And he's like, yeah, we're real connected. Yeah, this is real interesting. And she kind of ignores his responses, and she's just like so into him that she feels that. And it doesn't really go anywhere, right? Because it's not real depth. There's no real depth there. He's not really interested. It's kind of a one-sided connection that you have. And so let's talk a little bit about how to kind of combat these different things here, right? So if you're getting what I'm saying here, make sure that you say in the comments that you understand what I'm saying. If you don't understand what I'm talking about here, just ask a question. We'll talk about it in a little bit. So depth, right? That's a huge thing, right? There's a lot of times, that's one of the big problems here that we have is this depth thing, right? And so what ends up happening is there's just this kind of superficial relationship, and there's not really anything that's special there. And so what can we do to change things around, to flip the script, the first thing we're going to talk about is what to do if you go out on a date, or you're going out on a couple dates and a guy's coming on like just really, really strong. What can you do about that if you like this guy and you don't want him to end up disappearing, which there's a good possibility, especially if he's coming on really strong, right? There's a good possibility that it'll just blow up and disappear. What do? The first thing that you do is you slow him down and you sober him up, right? So earlier I talked about this whole idea where he comes on really strong and he's like caught up in these emotions, and he's just really experiencing all these emotions, and he goes out on this date, right? And he's experiencing it, and then he goes home and it kind of sobers up, and he's like, I just did all this stuff, and I said all these things, and I made all these promises, and I talked all about all this stuff, right? The first thing you want to do is sober him up while he's there, right? Because if you sober him up while he's there, you're pulling him out of that emotion. And, we talk about kind of triggering that emotion sometimes because it can be really, really powerful, but it's even more powerful if he's in that emotion, you pull him out, and then you give him a real reason to be in that emotion, something that's not superficial, that actually will last. And so how do you do that? The first way to do it is, especially if you don't really, this is for like if you're not deep in a relationship yet, right? You just kind of met this guy, maybe you've gone on a couple dates with him. The first way to do it is to say this. What you say is, we don't, he's coming on really, really strong. You say, we don't even really know each other that well yet. Right? When you say that and he's coming on strong, he's like, oh my God, you're so amazing. I think you're just so awesome. And you're like, whoa, we don't really know each other that well yet. Right? He like immediately it's almost like a slap in the face to him, right? Where he's like, whoa, like, and he might try to like not allow you to break him out of it and go and continue to go forward. But he might be like, oh yeah, you know what? You're right. We don't really know each other that well yet. Right. And the way to kind of give him if you want to do it a little bit more softly, or if you want to do it, in a secondary way after you've done this first one, here's what you do. You ask him why he likes you so much. Right. And you can usually tell he's in this phase because he can't think of anything real. Right. It's like, oh, I just feel it. Oh, I think we're just vibing so well together. Oh my God, we have this great connection together, and it's just this super like nonsensical, like superficial thing, right? It's just his emotions talking. He's feeling his emotions and he's talking about that feeling of his emotions. And so he's not, that it's not something that's real yet. Right. And if you talk about that and you're like, oh, okay. I get that he's coming from this place. You can kind of take a step back. You can lean back and go, okay, now let's talk about this for a second. Right. And so what you do is, if he says something like that, he says something like, I'm just so into the connection and we're vibing, whatever. What you want to do is say, okay, well, what are some actual things that you like about me? Not just this kind of vibe that we have going on, or this connection, which I think is really, really great. And I'm really enjoying this connection too, right? When you're talking to a guy and you're slowing him down and you're kind of stopping him, like I said before, right? If you hit him with a hard rejection, and he'll feel like it's kind of this slap in the face and he won't be able to recover from it. But if you hit him, even if it's hard, and you let him know that you really are enjoying it, and you're like, for instance, with the first one where you're like, hey, we don't even really know each other. I really enjoy the time that I've spent with you. And I really like this connection. I think you're really interesting, but I still don't really know who you are. Right. If you talk to him in that way, it still kind of gives him this clinging of hope, right? It gives him kind of this carrot that he can still kind of go after, instead of just slapping him and being like, hey, we don't know each other and we don't like each other or whatever. Instead, it's like, hey, I'm enjoying this and I seem to like you so far, but we don't, like, let's be real here, right? It's this thing that we call going meta, right? Where you kind of like come off of the interaction and you look down on it and you have a conversation about what is going on in the interaction, right? They call it going meta, and it can be a really, really powerful tool. We call it going meta, and it can be a really powerful tool when you're talking to a guy. And so you're like, hey, okay, so get him to tell you things that he actually likes about you, right? And one of the ways that you can do this in a really, really powerful way, and I teach this in my Love Frames program, my Love Frames Toolkit program. And basically it's a game that you play. And it's not like a game like you're playing games with a guy, but like a fun kind of conversational game that you have. And it's called, Do You Know What I Like About You? And so what you say is, do you know what I like about you? And then you say something about him that's like a personality trait, right? And so if you're kind of in this like hot and heavy phase, it's a quick way to kind of sober things up and then start to actually find things that you like about each other. And so you started off because you're the one kind of leading it and allowing it to happen and saying, hey, this is kind of the direction I'd rather go than this kind of superficial, hot and heavy thing that I think would be really fun. But if you've ever done the superficial, hot and heavy thing, you know it just doesn't last. It never lasts. And so if you want to set kind of a foundation for a relationship that does last, you have to find real things that you really like about each other's personalities and talk about those things. And the more things that you can come up with, not just that you like about him, but that he likes about you, the better off you're going to be altogether, right? And so the do you know what I like about you game starts off by you going, you know what I really like about you? And then you find something that you like about him. You know, maybe it's that he treats a waiter really well, or maybe it's that, you know, he really listens to what it is that you say, or maybe it's that he really goes after things that he wants in his life, or maybe it's that he's created a life that he really loves for himself, or maybe it's that he volunteers in things that are really important to him, or whatever. You know, find things, real character traits that you like about him. And you say one of them, right? You say, you know what I like about you? And then you say it, and then you go, your turn. What do you like about me? Right. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, you know what I like about you is that, you know, X, Y, and Z. And you can kind of play this game throughout your entire relationship if you want to kind of re-jog your memory about why two people like each other. But it's a really, really powerful way, because a powerful way to kind of connect on a deeper level if you're getting into these, you know, really hot and heavy, superficial kind of chemistry emotions, and you want the relationship to be deeper, right? And we have videos and programs and stuff on how to create an even deeper relationship if you're interested in those things. So make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Is everybody getting this? Everybody getting this? Understanding? Yeah, it sounds like everybody's understanding. Yes, I understand. All right. So that one's that, right? And so the next one, and this kind of goes to the whole thing where he kind of feels like you're not really that interested in him. So it's called the Attainability Principle. One of the things that we talk about a lot here is that a guy needs to feel like you're attainable, like he can win you, right? If he doesn't feel like he can get into the kind of relationship that he wants to have with you, then it's really difficult for it. He probably won't end up pursuing you. He probably won't continue to contact you, right? And this happens all the time, right? Because a lot of women are told to do things which sometimes can be really good if they're in certain situations. But if you're in a situation where you're more confident, you kind of realize your value, you know that the guy sees and realizes your value, instead of doing the whole like just leaning back as far as you can thing, which is kind of more of a thing for women that are kind of coming from a space of desperation and grasping, what you want to do is show your attainability, right? And you want to do this no matter what, because if he doesn't feel like you're attainable, then he won't continue to pursue you. And so the attainability principle in this sense, basically one is that you show him that you're interested, right? In a romantic kind of way. And I have actually in our last live stream, I talked all about this, the whole chasing one. I went over everything that you need to do for this, but just tell him that you're interested in him. Let him know that you're interested in him. And the second one is giving him ways to kind of chase you and invest in you, right? So letting him know that you're interested, telling him that you're interested, one of the best ways to do the interest thing is to tell him that things that he does are attractive, right? So that's really, saying things like, wow, that was really attractive, or like saying something about what he's doing and telling him that you think that that was really attractive. Another way is to give him things to kind of chase you or invest in you with, right? And so basically you kind of give him a space to come in to your life. I talk a lot, especially in my Make Him Want You program, about giving a guy space, like opening a space for him to come into your life and giving him that space. And basically with this, you're giving him a way to invest in you and chase you and pursue you. Whereas normally if he doesn't know, right? Like, because when you think about it, a lot of times guys, like, they're busy with stuff. They've got lots of things going on. And so they think about a girl and they look at this girl and they're like, well, I like this girl and I'm just really tired right now. And I like don't feel like putting together a whole plan on what we're going to do and where we're going to go and all these different things that are going to happen and, what I need to do to win her over. And I'm not even sure. And so if you can give him those things, right, you give him ways to kind of win you over and give him ways to kind of emotionally and energetically invest in you, then it's much more likely that he'll end up doing those things in order to win, if he wants to have a relationship with you and he's really attracted to you, which in this case, he probably is. Hot and heavy. Yep. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to talk about in terms of all of this stuff is what to do when he comes back, right? So if a guy ends up coming on really strong with you and then he ends up disappearing on you and then he comes back into the picture a couple of weeks later or whatever, and you're like, you know what I mean? You're like, wow, things were really great. Then you disappeared and all of a sudden you're back, right? There's a bunch of mistakes that women make in this arena right here, which is one, shaming a guy, right? Like attacking and shaming a guy. And it's okay to let a guy know that you don't like it. However, if that's all you're doing is you're just attacking him and letting him know that he doesn't like it, he'll just be like, oh, well, she doesn't like me at all, right? And he'll end up running away. And so what you want to do is, in my Love Frames toolkit, I'm talking a lot about the toolkit today, but in my Love Frames toolkit, one of the things that I talk about is setting boundaries, right? And it's important when you're setting boundaries, like we talked about a little bit earlier with the whole rejection thing. All of this stuff kind of comes together, right? It's all kind of similar formulas. The important thing to do is lead it with something that you like, right? Or something that you want. And the way to do that in this case is to say, if he starts a conversation back up with you and you're starting to talk with him and he's like, hey, why don't we go out for dinner tomorrow? Or why don't we go have some drinks? Or why don't we go have some coffee or go hiking or whatever it is that you guys do together? If he's like, hey, why don't we do this? And you kind of want to do it, but maybe you're not really sure, or maybe you're just curious about what happened and you don't want to see him again. What you want, right? Like, hey, yeah, I'm totally open to kind of meeting up again. I'm totally interested in seeing you again, something like that, right? Like I would love to hang out with you again. And then you go into the harder part, which is, but I'm just curious, like what happened? Like I didn't see you for a couple of weeks. And so I'm just curious about what happened to you during that period of time. Like, like what went on, right? And so you want to kind of refrain from giving him options of what went on. A lot of times when I tell women to do something like this, they'll end up just continuing to talk and they'll be like, did you, fall off a cliff? Did you lose your job? Did you, you don't want to do that, right? You just want to leave it open for him to answer. And so he'll answer, and based on the way that he answers will tell you a lot about what's really going on with him. And so if he answers in a way where he's kind of like dodging the question and he's not really telling you about what happened, that's a red flag, right? It's a red flag. It's like, okay, well, there's something weird going on here. And what he might end up doing is, which happens a lot of times in situations where we have women do this, is he'll end up apologizing and he'll be like, hey, I'm really sorry. I got caught up with work, or I got, something happened with my family, or I got sick, or whatever, right? Whatever actually happened. And I'd love to see you again. So like let's meet up and, do this if you're still interested. And so, having that phrase when he comes back so let's go back over it real quick. So what you do is you tell him what you want, right? Which is like, hey, I'd love to see you again, or hey, I'm open to meeting up with you again, or I'm really interested in hanging out, and I thought we had a lot of fun. And then you go into the curiosity, like what happened question, which is like, but I'm kind of curious, like, I felt like things were going really well, and then all of a sudden you disappeared. Like, what happened? Right. And so basically that opens things up to everything. So, all right. So that's it. Let's see if we have any questions about any of this stuff. So Kelly says, happened to me, but I believe it was more he was hooking me than trying to manipulate. A lot of times women will think that this is like some kind of manipulation thing with guys, but a lot of times it's not, right? Some guys have no idea that they're even doing this. And a lot of women do this as well. And maybe they know what they're doing, maybe they don't. Sometimes it's just that, people don't realize what kind of an impact certain things has on other people. They don't really know how you feel or whatever. And so it's not always a manipulation thing that ends up happening, right? Sometimes it is. Sometimes, most of the time, it probably isn't, though. That would be my guess. Yeah, Kathy says, I think it would be cool to date a coach like you that gets it. Kelly says she's going to listen later. Cool. Sounds like everybody's understanding. So Teresa says, I have this man that I just met online. He says he wants to marry me. He keeps on leaving and then coming back. Drives me crazy. What can I do? Okay, so first off, with the whole thing about a guy that you've never met before, that is something that you need to be very, very careful with. We have women that are in our community that have been scammed before. This is a common thing where some person in like Nigeria is using a fake profile, and they talk to you online, and they can't meet you because they're far away, and they do kind of these manipulative things and then end up scamming you out of money. And I know women that have lost thousands and thousands of dollars to this. So make sure, first off, don't fall in love with a guy that you never meet, right? You need these relationships. If you want a real relationship, it's got to be something in person, in real life. Like, don't fall in love with a guy online that you've never met. Like, just don't let it happen, right? If a guy is somewhere and he's never going to be able to meet you, don't let it happen. If a guy's somewhere and it's going to be a while before he can meet you, just wait to have those conversations. Just say, hey, come back and talk to me when you get in town. That way we can meet up for real in person and have a real relationship. You don't want to get caught up in scams. Stuff is ridiculous. Don't do it. Don't do it. Leaves you hanging so Cami says he told me after he finishes law school next year, he will decide from there. Well, so Cami, the question is, should you wait until he's finished with law school? Right? Like, that's the question, right? So sometimes you'll meet a guy and you're like, hey, you want a committed relationship, and you're like, hey, what are you thinking? How do you feel about this? Or, however you're starting the conversation. We have some ways to do it in our company. And if he's saying things to you like, I'm not ready, right? You ask him like, well, when will you be ready? And he's like, next year, sometime when I finish law school. My suggestion is that you don't wait for him, right? My suggestion is that you go out and meet other people and find other people, because what might end up happening is a year from now it's a year from now, right? Like he's finishing law school in a year from now. I mean, you might end up wasting your time, right? You might not, but you might. And if he's not sure about you now, the reason that this concerns me is because if he was serious, he'd say, hey, I am in love with you. I think you're amazing. And I want to marry you. And I want to commit to you. I want to have a real relationship to you. But I need to make sure that I finish law school before we start doing this stuff. That would be like a genuine, authentic kind of conversation that you're having with a guy. Whereas if he's like, hey, I don't want to have a relationship yet. And, I'm not going to decide until a year from now. So we should just hang out and, meet with each other and hook up or whatever until then. That's a huge red flag. And so you want to be careful of that kind of thing. So it sounds like that's it. Sounds like that's all the questions we have for today. Shorter live stream. Good stuff. So I hope everybody got a lot out of this live stream. If you're in a situation where a guy is coming on strong and then he's disappearing, I hope that all of that helps. We talked about the different reasons why a guy might do this, and then what to do if you're in the situation in the future, and then what to do when he comes back so that you can decide whether you want a real relationship or not. So thank you so much for being on this live stream with me today. And, we will speak again soon. So take care, everyone.